right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the tax webinar hosted by GreatSoft. I think what we can do is just give it another minute or two just to allow a few more people to join. I still see there's a few more people coming into the lobby. Firstly, just while we wait, I'd just like to introduce myself. So my name is Sean Minnar. I currently am the consulting team leader based here in Johannesburg. So joining me today is Zandre. So Zandre is based in Cape Town and she is part of our tax team. She's the tax product manager. So her and I will be running through the tax webinar today. So please, if you have any questions that you'd like us to address, please just pop it in the chat. Zandre will try to assist as I do the presentation. Otherwise, we will address them at the end of the session. Otherwise, what we can also do is just communicate with you directly to answer any questions that you might have. So I see a few more people trickling in, but let's begin with the webinar salon. So firstly, the goal for today is to cover the tips, tricks, and how to on everything provisional in GreatSoft. So we're going to be covering certain things such as assessments, how to download assessments into the GreatSoft system, making sure your information is correct in GreatSoft so that we can move forward with the provisional run, as well as using the different tools we have to make your life easier when it comes to doing the provisional run. So that's the goal of today. So let's jump in. What I'd like to do is just explain a little bit more about GreatSoft, just so that everyone knows. I'm just going to touch on GreatSoft as a company has been around for more than 20 years now. So we're celebrating our 20-year anniversary. We're very proud of the fact that we've been in the industry for so long, and you know, we have learned a thing or two down the road. We are in more than 14 countries across the world. So we have a big presence, as well as in South Africa. We have over 950 firms across the world that use GreatSoft software, and we're very proud of the fact that you know, we are a self-sufficient South African-based company that you know, strives to do the best that we can in the industry when it comes to tax and practice management. Right, a little bit about myself. So my name is Sean Minnar. I'm the senior consultant team leader here in Johannesburg. And I've been with GreatSoft for the last 6 years. You can see my email address on the screen. If you ever need to contact me for any reason, please feel free to pop me a message and I will get back to you. All right, let's just do some housekeeping about the webinar before we begin. So please note that this webinar will be recorded. Do not worry, we will distribute it to everyone. We'll let you know where to find it. More than likely, we will be posting it on YouTube. This will enable you to view it at any point in time. It will be accessible, as well as you can share it with you know, fellow colleagues that might want to also view the recording of the webinar. All right. All questions will be answered during the Q&A session. Please post them in the chat so we can take a look at them. And for any other general support queries, as usual, you can always reach out to our support team in Cape Town. The email address is support@greatsoft.co.za, and they will get back to you with any questions, with any answers that you may have questions for. All right. Then for any account specific questions, you can contact your account manager. So our account managers are at the ready. If you ever need anything, you can always reach out to the relative person. Otherwise, you can also pop them an email at info@greatsoft.co.za. All right, so for the agenda for today, introduction. So then we're going to be moving on to requesting and managing SARS assessments via GreatSoft. So this is obviously a very important part. We need to make sure that the assessments and information is in GreatSoft to make sure that we can proceed with our provisional run. Obviously, our provisionals are based on last assessed, so we need to make sure that the information is in there. So I'm going to just show you how to make sure that everything is in the system ready for the provisional run. Then preparing for your provisional run, making sure that everyone has the correct information or your static information on your clients are there and that they are up to date to make sure that the provisional calculations are then therefore correct. I'll then be taking you through the provisional run process. So that's actually performing the calculation, requesting the returns from eFiling, making sure that everything there is correct, and make sure that that is 100%. We're going to do some tax exception handling too. So this is a great feature in GreatSoft where you can actually pull reports to see variations and where figures may not be correlating between GreatSoft and SARS e-filing, such as payment differences and so on. So we'll take a look at that. And then we're going to be covering what we refer to as the tax global billing. So tax global billing is for our partners that use our billing services within GreatSoft, and the ability to actually generate invoices from the provisionals that you have run. Then we're going to be touching on a general Q&A. So we're going to try and answer some questions that come through on the chat, and we're going to just address anything that may need to be highlighted. All right, so let's get stuck into it. So firstly, requesting and managing SARS assessments via GreatSoft. So what happens is GreatSoft has the ability to retrieve assessments and correspondence from SARS e-filing in a daily automated fashion. So every single day we go and we request information from e-filing, and we say, please, hand over all the assessments as well as any correspondence that have come in over the last 24 hours. The reason why we automate it in a 24-hour sense is to make sure that no matter what happens, that you always have the most up-to-date information within your GreatSoft system, and that we have those assessments essentially for the provisional run. So we do have an automated system that does this, and it brings in that information into GreatSoft. Now, the question comes up, how do you see that information? How do you actually visually, correlate what's come in from e-filing so you can then action it? So we have an automated process that will actually send you an email of all the correspondence that has come in. So you can see this is an example up on the screen here, where we can see the taxpayer as well as their tax number and what kind of correspondence has come in. So maybe it's a statement of accounts or original assessments, and that information has been brought in overnight. There are also other ways to see this information. So if I go to the next slide, you can see that we actually have what we refer to as a SARS correspondence dashboard. So this is something we've brought in over the last couple of years. I do realize some clients still don't use this utility, so please make sure you go and investigate. I will run through exactly where to find it on the system with you now, and we can just make sure that you are using this to its full potential, because it's a great way to view the information that's come in from e-filing. All right. Then what we're going to do is I'm also just going to take you through the process of requesting and managing the assessments via GreatSoft. So that's the actual process of requesting in bulk the assessments from e-filing. This is essentially what you would do when you have a new client that has come on board. We need to retrieve the history from e-filing. So we need to bring in the past assessments in order to then move forward and do their provisional calculation. All right, so let's jump into the website. So just for all intensive purposes, this is a demo website that I'm going to be using. It has fictitious information in it. Unfortunately, it's therefore very difficult to show real live action when communicating with e-filing. Obviously, I cannot submit a provisional, through this because it's all fictitious data. But I'll try my best to explain the way around it and the way forward. All right, so the first thing that we're going to be touching on is the SARS correspondence dashboard. So to view the information that's coming from e-filing. So if you navigate to your your drop-down menu at the top left, we have the tax section, and at the bottom you'll notice that we have a SARS correspondence button. Now, you might navigate to your GreatSoft and you may not have that button. Please reach out to our support team and they can allocate that security to you to make sure that you can then have access to this dashboard. It is free. There's no license or paywall, anything. You can have it. It may just not be that you have the rights to access it. All right, so what we can do here is we can use our filters at the top of the screen to view information that has come in. So you can select which years you might want to look at, unallocated years, or maybe all the years, what kind of correspondence has come in from e-filing, and then you can also refer to, when they came in. So date from and date to, that is referring to as to when it was issued from e-filing. You can also rather maybe say that I want to look at downloaded dates. That means that these dates will then refer to as to when it was downloaded into GreatSoft from e-filing. Okay. Once you've selected your filters, you can just say search, and it will then search across the system to see information that has come in. So you can see we do have something that has come in. However, I'm just going to swap over to a different view just to give you a more representative idea of what you would more likely see. All right, so from here we can see we have quite a bit of information on the screen. We have assessments of income tax returns that have come in. We can see which client they have been attached to, what the document description is, and when the document was downloaded and issued. So all this information you can then obviously then view if you need to then action it. On the left, we have a few quick setting or a quick button guide. So if you need to download the assessment to your machine, you're more than welcome to. You can hit the top download button, as well as opening up the assessment. So if I'd like to open up the assessment in GreatSoft itself, I can just click on that button and it will then view that assessment. Obviously, this one's blank, keeping in mind that this is just fictitious data. We can also make sure that the information is correct on this client. So if you maybe spot something that you'd like to edit, you can click this button to open up the maintenance of that client. We then can mark this correspondence as complete. So this is what's really nice about this view is you can actually flag the correspondence as being completed. You can then see we have a completed field here. For the demo, my name in the site at the moment is Imtiaz, and you can see it's being completed by that individual. All right. So what you can also do here, you can use these filters at the top to filter the information in your view. So you can go ahead and actually, filter as much as you like. Otherwise, you can always export that information to Excel. Okay, this is a great way to view the information that's come in. You can manage it and you can see it. So please make sure that you use this. It's a great tool that we have introduced, and it's extremely helpful. All right. So the next thing I'd like to do is go through the process of actually downloading assessments into GreatSoft. So in GreatSoft, you can go to your drop-down menu and you can go to e-filing, and we can retrieve past assessments that have come through for any taxpayer. So any correspondence, any workings, any communication we do with e-filing happens through this screen. And what we can do is at the bottom here is request assessments, including correspondence by tax year. We also have the ability to request assessments by date range. The date range is referring to when the document was issued. So maybe the taxpayer has been issued many assessments over the last year. Maybe they were catching up on years. So therefore your date range would maybe be in the last year. However, just for this purpose, I'm going to select by tax year. Now in GreatSoft, we're going to use a little trick, which is an asterisk. So an asterisk in GreatSoft means everything. I'm going to select my years, 2022, and my year end, I'm going to just keep as all. With an asterisk in the name contains, I'm going to then just say filter, and I can then see all my clients coming through below. So what you can do here is the process of actually selecting all and then saying request. When you request, we then go to the e-filing system and we request any assessments for these given taxpayers for the 2022 year. Now, what will happen is that if it is already in GreatSoft, it won't overwrite it, or we'll just leave it. But if there's anything missing, maybe there's a taxpayer that you've only brought on recently and the assessment's not in GreatSoft because you've just brought them on, it will then come through from the system. I would then advise going through the different years and then retrieving all of those assessments. So another way that you can also retrieve that history, especially if you have a singular client that has not been on the system for long, you can then come to the request assessments by date range. You can then put in their name. So I'm going to use the example of 25 Link Road, and I'm going to say, bring in everything since, let's say, January 2019 to date. So by then selecting this client and clicking request, we then go and request from e-filing for any data that has come in between those periods. So any documents, any correspondence, assessments that have been issued between those dates will then come in. So this effectively will bring in the last few years of assessments. So obviously in this case, it says that no correspondence was found for this taxpayer, which means that there is nothing on the e-filing system for this given taxpayer. All right. So now the assessments are in GreatSoft. And when you do the request, it will also give you a report, and it will actually detail exactly what's come in for which years and for which clients. So you also have a nice report to then, correlate back and make sure that you action and take notes of everything that has come in. So now the assessments are in GreatSoft. So what can we then do with those assessments? So we need to, let's go view them. We can then, action them if we need to. You can download them and so on. So just keeping in mind to retrieve or to go view the assessments in our drop-down menu, tax dashboard, and you can go to assessments. In the assessment screen, you can see that I've just for this purpose, I put in a star, and I can now view all my clients on the system. We can also see a little bit more information about the assessments. So we can see what kind of taxpayer type they are. So that's the calculation that would take place. You can see we have some companies and some trusts. We can see when the tax return was submitted. Even if you didn't do the tax return in GreatSoft, we still retrieve a submitted date from e-filing. So with the assessment, we also get a date as to when the return was submitted. So we can see when it was submitted. Then under the assessed, we can see when it was assessed. And very importantly, we can also view the original assessment. So this 0 is representing the original assessment, and the first revised, second revised. And you can see we have multiple records for this taxpayer in that case. We can also see the audited section. So this is something new that Zandre and the team have been working on very hard. And we now have the ability to view if the assessment has been flagged for audit or not. So what we've done with that information is we've displayed it on this page. So you can then see if this client has been audited or not. For this case, we can see all these clients have not been audited. So that's great. And we can also see by the green tick on the right-hand side of the screen that the assessment record does exist for this taxpayer. So this has been brought in from e-filing, and we can now view that information. So let's take a look at 25 Link Road. So from here, I can see the information that's been brought in from e-filing. There's also some key information at the top with dates. I can see the assessment itself, and I can then go ahead and communicate with the client, make sure that they understand the assessments. I can print a letter from here if I like. Now, we also have the SARS correspondence tab at the top of the screen. This tab allows you to actually view the correspondence that has come in, so the actual documentation, and you can then download the assessment itself issued from e-filing. Keeping in mind, we also have a show unallocated button at the top left. You can click this and view any documentation that has not been allocated. What that means is any documents that have come in, sometimes e-filing gives us documentation that is not attached to a year, but you can then view it in the screen to see any documents that have come in that is not essentially attached to the 2022 year. Also, there would be a PDF icon on the left. You can just click that, and then you can then download that documentation straight to your machine. All right. So now that we have our assessments in the system, we have downloaded historical assessments, we are now ready to start our provisional process. So what does that mean? Let's go back to our slideshow. That means we can now start preparing for our provisional run. So in GreatSoft, we have something we refer to as the provisional tax checklist. This is your how-to guide on the provisional process. It is available to everyone that has a GreatSoft system. I'll show you in a minute exactly where to find it and how to download it and view it. And this outlines the provisional tax process in a high level, but also it includes some of the key checks that you can use, some key reports that you can use to make sure that your information is correct when completing the provisional process, and it makes things a lot smoother and more efficient. Then what we're going to take a look at is the provisional tax exception handling. So that's making sure our static data is up to date. Something also very important is that the clients are registered between GreatSoft and e-filing. So if there is no connection between the GreatSoft system and e-filing, we won't be able to retrieve assessments, we won't be able to submit provisionals. So it's key to make sure that they are registered and the link is on. I will show you how to view that information and how to link those clients. We will then go through the process of doing that actual registration to make sure that that is all correct. All right, so let's navigate to our provisional process. So I can start to go through the provisional checklist. So we can then navigate to our drop down, we can go to the tax dashboard, and I can navigate to provisionals. On your provisional screen, you can see we have a couple key buttons at the top. Global Calc, we'll be getting to that a little bit later, as well as the provisional checklist and a client exception report. So provisional checklist, what is this? So this is a document that GreatSoft has put together to guide you through the provisional process. And essentially, this is all you need to make sure that your provisional process goes smoothly. You'll notice that we have a different phase. So you can see it says phase 1. If I scroll a bit further, phase 2. So you can follow those phases to make sure that your information is correct. Then you can do the actual provisional process. And then obviously thereafter making sure that the returns are submitted and everything has gone through the system. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to loosely refer to this document from time to time to make sure that that information is correct. And what I'd like to do is suggest that people actually print this document out. I've seen it work best when it's actually physically up on a wall. You can see we even have a little space for a check. So as you go through your list, you can actually check off the different things that you have done. So you'll notice in the first section here, we urge you to make sure your information is correct. So obviously a client needs to be flagged for tax in order to perform a tax calculation. A client does not need a date terminated. In other words, it needs to be active within the system. We need a date of birth and ID number to work out the rebate on the provisional calculation. So this information is important, and that's why we also make sure, and we reiterate it here to make sure that your provisional process goes smoothly. All right, so how do I identify this information, whether it's correct or whether it's incorrect? And you'll notice just below that, we then suggest some exception reports that can be checked in order to view that information. So we have a report called Clients with Exceptions. This is a great report. This allows you to actually view information within the system and make sure that multiple areas of your static information is correct, such as tax reference numbers and ID numbers, invalid year-end setups. All right. So I hear you asking, Sean, where do I find this report? So very simple. On your provisional screen, you'll notice at the top, client exceptions. So this is the reports I'm referring to. And from here, you can then select your filters on the left to then include what exception type you'd like to look at. So for us, what we're going to do is I'm just going to quickly take you through these filters. These filters at the top, I can leave blank because I want to include all officers, all the partners in the firm, all the managers in the firm. So I'm not going to worry about those. I am going to worry about my year end. I want to see February year ends and what kind of service do I want? So I want to see all my tax clients. Those are the clients that I'm, busy doing provisional calculations on. So I want to see those, and I want to see tax clients that have a certain exception type. So in this instance, I'm going to select no IAP6 registration. What does that mean? That means that there is no link between the clients on GreatSoft and the clients in e-filing. So this is very important. Once I've selected my information, I can then say show report. And it has no information for me. There we go. So here now I have a list of information, a list of my clients that have been flagged for tax. So you can see, yes, they are flagged for tax. And calculate prop tax. They have been flagged to calculate prop tax, yet they have no IAP6 registration. They are highlighted in red, so you can very easily see that information. We can then go through this information and then edit the static information to make sure that that information is therefore correct. So let's take a quick example here, van 034, and I'm going to just navigate. I'm going to use our top search, keeping in mind that you can use this top search, and we can then view our client. So now I know that this client does not have an IAP6 registration. I now need to action that. So what you can do is view the client's information. If you need to edit any static information, such as a tax number, maybe a year end that's not registered. Keeping in mind the year ends must be registered, and they must obviously have a year end of February. So I can then, if I navigate to my tax button at the top, and I can navigate to the tax summary, I can see this client is only registered for income tax, not provisional tax, even though we have flagged them for the calculate prop tax. So this is something that maybe we need to go investigate to make sure it is 100% before our provisional run. Okay, if you need to make any changes to the clients, you can also hit the edit button at the top. You can click on edit clients, edit tax information, edit year end if you need to, and go make those changes. All right, so this client is not flagged for provisional tax, or sorry, is not registered for provisional tax. So how do we register our clients? We have a process in GreatSoft that you can do it in bulk. It's very simple. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but we can navigate to our e-filing screen. Remember, that's our communication screen when we're communicating with e-filing. And I can navigate to the bottom of the page and request a taxpayer list. To request a taxpayer list is referring to the list we receive from e-filing, and that allows us to then compare the information between e-filing and GreatSoft and create the different links we need in order to then communicate and open up that channel with e-filing to submit returns, request assessments, and so on. Okay, this is a very simple process. It's a 3-step process. All you need to do is first come in, request taxpayer list, and say request and compare. So request and compare downloads that list from e-filing and compares it to what we have on GreatSoft. It will then run through all the records. So it's telling me I have 180 records in total. I don't have any new income or provisional tax records, and there are no changes to the existing records. So my information for this is correct, but when you do it, it might not be. So what you then need to do is move on to step number 2, which is then selecting which clients you'd like to link to the profile that you are currently on. Keeping in mind, some firms have different profiles, so you may need to just select the profile at the top left, but you then select your profile and you select which taxpayers. There will be a little checkbox on the left-hand side of the screen. And then step number 3, click update. So by updating these taxpayers, this creates the link between GreatSoft and e-filing. We then will have a link between the two and we can start communicating. And when you then navigate to your client, it will then have the provisional record on the client to say that they have been linked. All right, let's just go back to our exception report. There are different kinds of exceptions that you can also double check. So there's a multitude here, no tax mandate here, which is important. The taxpayer type is correct, no tax number. So, you know, that's something that could be vital, that we need to make sure that our clients have, you know, the tax numbers and that they are correct. Also keeping in mind that you can multi-select here and see different errors or different exceptions within the system. So here we can see this one has no tax number, but they do have an IP6 registration. Now, with all of our reports, keep in mind, you can then download the Excel. So if I want to then put it in Excel, if I need to filter or search, you're more than welcome to. We also have PDF and Word. All right. Okay. So let's move on to our actual provisional process. All right. So to perform the provisional tax run, we first need to make sure all of our information is correct, which we've gone over. We need to make sure that we have our assessments in the system, which I've shown you how to now download assessments from e-filing into GreatSoft. What we need to do now is actually start the provisional run. So you'll see that we have global run process, confirm settings are correct. So I'll go through that in a second. We then need to run the global calculation for our current period. Now, you'll notice that sometimes it's people need to wrap their heads around it, but we first do the calculation. We have to first create a record, call it a tracking record almost, for our taxpayers. Then we request the IP6s from e-filing. So we first do the GreatSoft calculation, then we request the IP6s. We then can start to pull our reports to make sure that the information is correct between you know, the GreatSoft calculation as well as the e-filing base calculation. We then need to go into our provisionals and make any changes. Maybe we need to, you know, include PAYE if we're calculating on actuals. We then can save our provisionals and distribute our letters to the clients. So communicating to the clients to make sure that they are happy with those provisionals. We then flag our returns as ready for submission. So I'll show you, you can actually do that process in bulk if you like. Otherwise, you can also do it one by one. And then we have the final part of it, which is actually submitting the provisionals. Once again, I'll show you, I'll take you through the process, but you can actually submit the provisionals one by one if you like. Otherwise, you can do it in bulk. All right, so let's jump in. Let's navigate to our provisional page. So keeping in mind, drop down, tax, provisionals. And from here, I'm going to just put in a little asterisk. And I'm going to make sure my tax year, my period, and my year end is correct. So 2023-01 February year end. And we are then going to perform our tax calculation. Now, something that you might just want to go over, this does not change period to period or year to year, but we also have our tax settings. These tax settings need to be correct in order to perform the calculation and to give you the correct results at the end of the day. But this is not something that you really go in and change. So I would advise, if this is your, not your first run, then don't go in here, don't make any changes. But going forward, if this is your first provisional run, I'm going to quickly advise you on what settings to have. So calculate prov tax on a payment basis. That means that payments have to be in the GreatSoft system, and the calculation is then based with that. So if you are calculating P2s and there was a P1 calculation and there was a P1 payment, that payment will then pull through to the P2 to obviously then give you a balance. Apply the prov tax 8% increase. Yes, this should always be on to make sure that if the assessment is older than a year, I think it is, then it starts to apply the 8% increase. They use the standard VAC code, yes, of course. Check date registered, yes, we'd like to do that. And calculate according to the rate and income formula. This is referring to the farmer's calculation. Yes, we want to. COVID-19 relief. So this obviously isn't applicable anymore. So you can untick that if you like, or you should. And any changes you make, you need to just say save and close. Validate tax return sent to SARS. So this is just referring to the date in which it's sent to SARS to make that, that's a key date that we need to then validate. So yes. And then a little bit of information when it comes to the calculation itself. So number of historic years for processing, we normally keep this on 10 or 20, so you can just leave it as that. And we have use PAYE from P1 assessments or none for the P2 calculation. So today we're not doing P2s, but when you do your P2, where must the PAYE come from? And you can actually choose. You can either take it from whatever was on the P1 and times about 2. You can take it from the previous assessments. Otherwise, you can also leave it blank. Similar with foreign tax, when calculating for P2s, you can choose if you want it from the P1 or assessment or none. Similar with last assessed and the similar with the medical scheme credits, as well as the additional medical scheme expense. Okay. Similar with the pull through from the gross income, where must that information come through? From the last year assessment or the latest assessment? Otherwise, none. We also have the ability to use a global checklist. So that this checklist allows you to perform the global calculation on a very small set of clients. Most firms would not use this. They would perform the calculation across the system. All right. Please keep in mind, do not go and make any changes to any of these settings below this. This is for our non-South African clients, like Namibia, Botswana, and so on. And then also we have some settings for letters and so on, which are only applicable to GreatSoft. All right, so we have now made sure our settings are correct, and we can now go ahead and perform our calculation. So to do the actual calculation, you can then click on the Global Calc button at the top of the screen. It will then bring up our Global Calc little interface. So what you would normally do is create a calculation for the entire client base, is what I would advise. Otherwise, you could filter per office. So maybe you only want to do a certain group of clients, only certain clients or taxpayers that are associated with a certain office. You can then filter accordingly. Then, very important, we have our tax year, our period, and our year end. Please make sure these are correct. It will pull through from your previous page. So I was on 2023-01 Feb, so it will then select that too. And you'll then notice we also have a payable on and a due to SARS on date. This information will automatically populate. GreatSoft will work out if the due date falls on the weekend, and it will refer to the Friday if necessary. So it does that automatically. You do not need to worry about that. Then something else, we also have a tab at the top here that refers to fees and letters. Please make sure that this information is correct. If you are using GreatSoft for the billing to produce the invoices, as well as if you are producing letters out of GreatSoft. A lot of our clients use eDocs to distribute the provisional letters. This does not apply to you. eDocs is a completely separate system. But if you're using GreatSoft, such as like the CDM system, or you printing the letters one by one, you need to make sure this information is correct. So we can see that the way that we have it set up is our individuals and corporates, and then we have our payables and our nils. And we see we have a fee amount for each accordingly, and this information will then pull through to our provisional calculations. If this information is not correct, please make sure you follow the guides, go take a look at how to set up the master forms. This information pulls from the master forms. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to contact our support center, and they will then walk you through the process of making sure that this is correct. And then we can go ahead and actually generate our global calculation. So very simple, click the button, it says, are you sure? I'm very sure. And it will then run through our calculation. Right. I can then close this window and I'm just going to refresh. You'll notice nothing's changed. Obviously, we have done this before, but now I can start to see the records that are being produced, and some of them are maybe opened by supervisor. I can see we've got a couple errors that we need to, or rather alerts that we need to take a look at, and a couple information pop-ups to make sure that this information is correct. Now, GreatSoft does have the ability to calculate a provisional if there is no last assessed in the system. It's a setting we can turn on or off. So depending on if you want a provisional record to be created, if whether there is no assessments in the system or not, we can change that option. So if you find that you've done your provisional calculation and it has not generated a provisional for someone that where there's no loss assessed in the system, you can also just reach out to our support team. We can switch that option on, and you can then re-perform the global calculation. I'd also just like to quickly address a question that we see quite often come in, which is, can I do the global calculation more than once? And the answer is yes, you can. So you'll notice that we have a global flag here in the middle of the screen. This is referring to the calculation, whether it's been performed by the global calculation. And if it is not ticked, it means that you've gone in and edited the provisional calculation. When you edit the calculation, it then refers to it as a manual calculation. It means you've gone in and made a change. So you'll notice here, on the top, calculation is manual. Okay, so that just means that you've gone in and actually made a change to this calculation. All right, so let's take a look at the actual calculation itself. So we can see last assessed as well as the prov tax last assessed. This is very important, and the reason why we have two is because the calculation itself in this case is based off the 2020 assessments, but the latest assessment we have in the system might be maybe a 2021 assessment, but it falls within the outside of the 14-day rule. In other words, it was issued too early for the calculation to be based upon. Okay. Also, what we find happens is you do your provisional calculation and then the assessments come through and so on. So this is referring to what the calculation is based on. So that's the prov tax last assessed, and the latest assessment we have in GreatSoft. Okay. If these are out of sync and you want to update your calculation, a button will appear on the right, and you can then click that, and it will then refresh your calculation to the latest assessment that you have in GreatSoft. We're just trying to make sure that the information we have in GreatSoft is up to date, and obviously applies to all the SARS rules. All right, so we can then start to see our taxable income. We have the rebates and normal tax that will be calculated for you automatically. The less medical expenses and so on need to be filled in, and the less prov tax paid, obviously, for P2s and PAYE and foreign tax credits. So this information obviously needs to be requested from the clients, the taxpayers, and then filled in on the calculation if you want to base it on the actuals. All right. Obviously, then we have our total due for this taxpayer. Now, what we can do is we can generate a letter. So if you like, you can click on the view letter icon on the top right of the screen, and it will then produce a letter for you. And you can then go ahead and distribute that to your client. Also, at this point, what you'd want to do is make sure that all your information is correct. We can do that by pulling a summary report or a detail report. This is at the top of your screen, so you can just simply click on summary. We can check on the expanded, and we can then start to go through our provisionals and making sure that our calculations are correct. So this is a great way to get a very nice overview of all the provisionals that have been calculated. You'll also notice that the report automatically looks at 2023-01. That is because we were working on that screen previously. So it recognizes where you were and then tries to generate the report for you. You can then view the tax on income estimated, what the last assessed is, and whether it's been done with the global, and what if the IRP6 is still outstanding. Keeping in mind, you can also always export this information. Okay, so I've now seen my calculation. That's great. What is the next step? we need to retrieve the returns. So obviously we need to now bring in the SARS calculation, that base amount, what they have according to their records in terms of POIE, loss assessed, and so on. So how do we do that? There's two ways of doing it. You can either do it one by one, which some firms do like to do. You can click on the file button at the top left of the screen with the three ellipses, and you can say retrieve return. When we retrieve the return, it will give you a message saying that the return it will only be available in 24 hours. The reason for this is when we click retrieve return, we put in a request to e-filing to say, please, we want this return. They say to us, fine, we'll get it for you in a couple minutes. So for you to then retrieve the return, you don't have to wait the 24 hours. You normally can wait about an hour and it then should be available. You come in and you repeat the exact same process. Come back up to the file button, say retrieve return, and it will then come into the system. When it comes into the system, you will notice that under the e-filing column in the middle of the screen here will then be populated. So we'll have their last assessed according to their records. We will have their base amounts, their previous tax paid, as well as POE foreign tax credits, and any outstanding interest and penalties if applicable. Right. You'll then also notice on the search screen, the e-filing status will change from new to return retrieved. That means that we've now retrieved that return into GreatSoft. Now, that is one way to do it, where you can do it one by one. Obviously, we want to try and avoid that. We want to speed up the process. So what you can do is retrieve the returns in bulk. So remember, we're going to be communicating with e-filing. So we come to our e-filing screen. Under provisional tax, we have request returns. So make sure your years are correct, 2023, let's say February. You can select if you only want to do nulls, payables. In this case, we're going to do all. And we're going to use the GreatSoft trick where we put in an asterisk or star in the name contains. I'm going to then press enter, and I can then view all my provisionals I've just generated. You can see what is the tax calculation status. Is it payable? Is it a null? How much is payable? So all that information is on your screen, and you can then select all. By selecting all, it will go and tick all our taxpayers within the system, and I can then click on request. When I click request, exact same process. It will go to e-filing, request the returns, and the record be open. It will then come back with a message saying that there will be 24 hours until it is available. Don't worry about the 24 hours. Wait 1 hour, go make your cup of tea, come back, do the process again. Put in a star, select all, request. When you request, all those returns will then come in. All right. So now that we have our returns in the system, what do we do next? So we then need to obviously go through, we need to make any adjustments that we need to. Please make use of these two different reports. We have the summary reports and the detail reports. This detail report is a little bit different, so it just has a bit more information. You can also use this to see if the IP6 is still outstanding. OS means outstanding, so therefore the IP6 is outstanding. It hasn't been brought into GreatSoft. All right. You can then go through, distribute this to the partners so they can obviously then check the calculation, make sure that that is all correct. And then you can also start to use some of your exception reports. So we have some really nice reports in the system where you can actually use it to compare information. So if I navigate to my report section, we have the tax provisional section. And in here, I can view the reports that will help me during this process. So we have clients with no provisional request from e-filing. So that's an important one we might need to check. And what one I really enjoy using is clients with SARS estimate differences. This will highlight any differences between what we have on GreatSoft and what's been retrieved from e-filing. Make sure you use these reports to check your information. Once again, it will be in our provisional checklist. So if you scroll a little bit further down, exception here, clients excluded from global calculation, taxpayers with no provisional record for period. These reports will help you make sure that every client and every taxpayer has a record, and it has been brought in from e-filing. All right, so what we can then do is once all our information is correct, we want to distribute our letters. So if you distribute your letters, there's a couple different ways to do it. As I said, some clients have eDocs that's very good at distributing those letters. We also have the ability to generate global letters. So generating global letters, you can come to the top, you can make your selection here, you can zip to file, and you can then say continue. It will then prompt you, do you want it in separate documents or do you want it in one big single document? Maybe you're going to be printing them out. You can then say yes, and it will then download to your machine. We also have the ability to, if you have the CDM system, there will be an extra button here on the right. You select CDM, and it will then publish them through to the CDM system. Otherwise, for everyone that uses eDocs, you then start your eDocs process, you prepare, you review, and then you distribute your letters to your clients. Okay, so now we've got feedback from our clients. They say they're all happy. We go make, obviously, the changes that are needed. We then need to go ahead and get ready to submit these provisionals to e-filing. So how do we do that? We need to mark them as ready. Okay, so at the top of your screen, you'll notice that we have a button here that says mark ready. So when I click this button, okay, we can't do it with that one. When I click this button, it will then allow us to actually mark this return as ready. And only when a return is marked as ready can we then submit. Can we then actually submit the return to e-filing? So, sorry, let me just find one that I can actually show you. Okay, so this one's already been marked as ready, so I'm just gonna reset it, and I'm gonna mark this return as ready. Now, for my case, I haven't retrieved the returns from e-filing, so it's actually trying to warn me. It's trying to say this return has not been retrieved from e-filing and cannot be submitted via e-filing. So it's just trying to warn me to make sure, because I've skipped a process, I haven't retrieved the return. I'm going to say finalize anyway, and you'll then notice that the return gets locked down. So we can see everything gets grayed out. We can then see that I can't do anything more, and then it's in a state to be submitted to e-filing. All right. Now that's to do it one by one. However, we'd like to do it in bulk, so we can navigate to our e-filing page, and under the provisional tax, we have a flag returns ready. So essentially what this does is you can then flag your returns ready in bulk. So I'm just going to use an asterisk again. I'm going to then go and select the returns that I want to be flagged as ready and in preparation to submit to e-filing. You can, if you like, you can just say select all, and you can say update. All right. So then from there, you'll notice that under the ready tab here, we will have it marked as ready. So ready to submit to e-filing, and it will also reflect on the reports that we can then submit. Right, now we need to submit those returns. So how do we do that? We can go to our e-filing screen. We can say submit returns. Once again, we can choose if we want nulls or payables or all. And I can then go ahead and submit my returns. Obviously, I haven't retrieved any returns, so it's not going to allow me to submit. But you need to make sure that you've followed the process, done the calculation, retrieved the return, and then marked it as ready. And it will then only allow you to submit those returns in this process in bulk. All right. So I see we're running out of time already. This process has gone very quickly. But what we can then do is let's move on to our global billing. So clients that make use of our provisional global billing, we have the ability to actually produce invoices out of GreatSoft. So inside the provisional, you will notice that when we did the calculation, you allocate a fee and an amount, and it will then allow you to submit those provisionals as well as generate invoices from them. So how do we do that? We can navigate to our GreatSoft screen. We can go to our drop down and we can go to tax global billings. So here you then select your different filters, and we can then gonna select the tax year of 2023, the Feb year end, and the provisional period of 1st. You can then choose, do I want to generate invoices for everyone that has a provisional record? Otherwise, I can also say, give me for all provisionals that have only been submitted to e-filing. In other words, that has a date submitted. You can then go ahead and just fill in all this information. We obviously want for provisional tax. Give it a batch number. On a partner. And then we can say continue. Are you sure? You say yes, and it will then generate our invoices for us. So this is a very neat feature. This allows you to, generate hundreds of invoices in a very short amount of time to make sure that we can then bill those clients. So if I go into our reset page, you can see that we have produced 112 records. That's totaling 80,000 Rand. All right, so the last thing I'd like to just go through quickly is with regards to the tax entries. So obviously in GreatSoft, we need to record the payments for our provisionals. So how do we do that? We go to our tax dashboard and we can navigate to our entries. So tax entries in GreatSoft is referring to the payments. And in GreatSoft, we have a few different ways that we can generate payments. So firstly, you can always manually create a payment. What do I mean by manually? There's actually a new button here at the top left. I can then click that. I then select my client, so 25 Link Road. I select 2023 and first provisional, and I can then say continue. Okay, it says that they have a due amount of 646,000. Get some water, yeah. And I can then start to actually record the information of how much was paid. So you can then just fill in the items at the bottom here, give it a reference. You can then save that information and record that that was paid to SARS. This information is vital because it will then pull through to the P2, and it also allows you to view information like how much was due for the return and how much was actually paid. Now, what you can also do, instead of going and manually capturing one by one, we have the ability to generate global tax entries. By doing this, what you do is you can actually generate whatever was recorded on the provisionals itself. It will record that as a payment. So the year 2023, period 01 February, and I'm going to say generate. It will then say, okay, so that's that then done. And if I refresh here, we can now see all these payments have been created. These payments are simply a recording of how much was due from the provisional. So it would then be your job to go through these to make sure that that amount was actually paid. If for whatever reason the taxpayer did not pay that, you can just click on the amounts and you can then just edit this record. So you click the edit button and you can then edit how much was actually paid. Okay. Alternatively, you can use our new system where we can actually retrieve the payment information from e-filing. So I can go to my drop down, I can navigate to my e-filing screen, and I can actually request a provisional tax account statement by date range. So I can simply click on this button. I then select my tax year, so 2022, and obviously in our case it would be 2023 if we look a little bit into the future. And we can then go from date, so let's say January. So this is when the payment was made, and it should have happened at that point sometime. Then we're going to use the asterisk, press enter, and I can view all of my clients. I'm then going to select all, and I'm going to say request. When I request, it will give me the same message that we're used to. Please wait 24 hours in order to retrieve this information. Once again, wait about an hour or two, come back, repeat the exact same process, say request, and then those payments will then come into GreatSoft. Okay, so you will then, if you navigate to the entry screen, you will then notice that the payments will then start coming in, and it will then populate on the screen, making sure that that information is correct. Obviously, our payments, our provisional payments are very important for our P2 calculation, to make sure that that is in there, as well as when you're calculating off an RTR. So when you have an RTR, we want to give you what balance is due or refundable according to the calculation as well as the provisional payments. So this information is vital. That's why we give you a couple different ways to generate these payments. Obviously, the easiest is to come into the provisional tax account statement by date range and request them straight from e-filing. All right. That covers everything with regards to the scope of this webinar. I'm just going to pull up the presentation again. So the tax global billings and the tax entries. Please, we will distribute this slide with everyone, just so for reference, as well as the recording. So don't worry about that. What we're going to do is we've put together a presentation with some frequently asked questions. And what we've done is actually put together 10 of the most frequently asked questions that come into our offsite consulting team, and then iterated exactly how to go fix them and how to go accomplish this. This will also be distributed to everyone that has attended the webinar today, so that you can also then go view that information, and it has a really nice little video in each slide explaining what each question is about and how to resolve it. That will be distributed today to all the attendees that are joining us today. All right, what I'm going to do is let's open up the floor for some questions. I've seen a couple come in. Thank you, Zandre, for answering them. Let's just go through them quickly. Zandre, if you have one or two that I maybe need to just take a look at.
Hi, Sean. Nothing specific. There was just one, but I'll send an email with the steps on how to do it, how to manually capture an assessment. I don't know. Yeah. I don't think there's enough time to go through it, so I'll just send the steps.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so
and then everything else has been
addressed. Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Zandra. Yes. So obviously we do have some clients that will not allow you to have access to the e-filing profile. Unfortunately, then it's a bit of more of a manual process. You need to manually capture the assessment in GreatSoft if you want to record it, and it is very easy. Zandra can and show you. But also, what I'd like to just show is in GreatSoft we do have our own help file. So please notice in the top right, we have a little icon here that is a question mark, and this will then allow you to actually go to our help file, and you can see we have a lot of information on here. Here's our tax compliance, so you can say see more, and these are all how-to guides, videos on how to set up year ends. Our provisional tax checklist is all here. And you can also then use this information to then go ahead and create like an assessment in GreatSoft, a manual assessment in GreatSoft. Right, I see a couple other questions coming in here. Heinrich, when will this functionality be available in Namibia? Sorry, I'm not exactly sure which function you're referring to. Unfortunately, Namibia doesn't have a e-filing interface that we can interact with. Hopefully, it will come soon. I know that we're in talks with it, but for Namibia, it's a lot more manual process, generating the provisionals and then reporting using the forms, those yellow forms. For each provisional in the system. So Patricia asked, does GreatSoft have capabilities to deal with the auto assessments in e-filing? So we will retrieve those auto assessments in GreatSoft. Zandra, I think we have reiterated recently in a release notes of how to handle that. Is that correct?
Not completely, Sean. We didn't have enough time with the auto assessment being issued to get all the information we needed. So there is a function where you can actually show that the that the client is auto-assessed, the taxpayer. So there is a function for that where you can manually just show that this taxpayer was auto-assessed. And then currently it is being pulled into GreatSoft, the auto-assessments, but it will show us revised assessment 1. We are working on getting that to look more user-friendly, where you can actually see that it's been auto-assessed, but it's not currently available. And then everything is ready. If you want to do corrections for an auto-assessment, you just need to go into e-filing, unfortunately, and say edit, and then only will you be able to retrieve the return in GreatSoft, and you can submit and edit as normal.
Excellent. Perfect, Andre. Thank you so much. All right. There was question CPD for this webinar. Unfortunately not. So no, there aren't any CPD points for this webinar currently. All right. I think we can then close off this webinar. Thank you everyone for attending. Please feel free to reach out to our support center if there is any questions that you might have. We have our contact details up on the screen here. Please give us a call, pop us an email if you like, follow us on Facebook and Twitter if you like to. I just want to reiterate, we have a virtual classroom training session happening on the 11th of July. This is with regards to actually taking you through, and we spend just about a whole day. I've tried to condense a lot of information into 1 hour, but we actually spend a lot more time. We go through GreatSoft. We show you some tips and tricks on how to do the returns as well as provisionals. Go through some client static information, nice reports that we have in the system. If you want to join, it does come at a cost, but if you want to join, please reach out to the email address you see on screen, byronw@greatsoft.co.za, if you'd like to attend this training, and we can arrange that you get it. It's all online, and it's done by one of our senior consultants that then will take you through the process of the tax in general for GreatSoft. Please also, we also would like, any clients to please reach out to us in the tax user group. You can reach out to Zandre, her email address is up on the screen, and you can actually then chat to her. We want your feedback. Where can we, make the product better or faster or more efficient? So please, we love the feedback. Please, come back to us, and it would be great to hear from you. We're more than happy to have a meeting with you and even just have a chat. All right, so the question was posed, where can we get the slides? It will be distributed to you. We're going to send a pack out to everyone. It will have these slides, a reference to where you can find the recording online, and also with reference to the frequently asked questions, a presentation with all the videos of how to address those. So Babes, you asked, what is the cost of the virtual classroom training? So you can just email Byron. It's not a lot. If I'm not mistaken, it's about 700 Rand or so. And it's a full day training with one of our consultants. There we go. Schwarz come to the rescue. 780 Rand excluding VAT. And it's quite a few hours of training, and we cover the entire system in detail. All right, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Zandra. I think we can then close off for now. Thank you, everyone, for attending. It's been a pleasure, and good luck with the season. Please let us know if we can help in any way, and we'll see you soon.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. Great presentation. Have a great day, everyone.
All right, bye.